It seems that lost media enthusiasts and animation fans tend to go hand in hand. Either since most animated films are in the family genre, it enables people to learn or uncover something new about their favourite nostalgic property, or maybe people just find the history of animation to be so fascinating to learn. Whatever the reason, I thought it would be a fun project to assemble together an iceberg purely about lost animated features. Although we're going to put Disney aside for this video, only because there's just so many unfinished projects from the Disney campus that it can really make up its own iceberg chart. With the exception of Disney, we're going to be looking at everything else, from feature length to short films. As it goes, we'll start off at the very top of the iceberg, then gradually working our way down to the niche and obscure. And remember, if this sounds like your cup of tea and you want to see more videos just like this one, then subscribing would be humbly appreciated. Joining me along the journey covering more rare and obscure, things.
Hello. Ooh.
Starting things off with the best well-known discontinued animated project, The Thief and the Cobbler. The movie has such a complicated and fascinating history behind it that trying to summarise it within a short moment doesn't do it any justice. It's really worthy of a full-depth video, but basically British animator Richard Williams had been trying to work and complete on an animated epic set in the Middle East, spending just shy of 3 decades in development. Due to an unfortunate combination of perseverance for perfection and Hollywood meddling into an art house movie, the final movie that was released wasn't exactly to Richard Williams' vision. There have been various attempts over the years to try and re-piece the original version back together, with filmmaker Garrett Gilchrist's attempts being by far the most ambitious, piecing together a ton of restored and unseen footage, making the supreme cut often referred to as the Recoble cut. The Works was a CGI animated feature being worked on between 1979 and 1986. If the movie had been completed during the end of its development, then it would have predated Toy Story by at least 9 years. The story was about a supercomputer called The Works, who caused the events of World War III, leading to humans to escape the Earth to live in the asteroid belt, and the Works computer repopulates the planet via robots. A young human lady, known as T-Square, attempts to lead a resistance to take back the Earth. The movie never wound up being finished, and it's not known as to how complete the movie was. A script is available to read online, but it's worth bearing in mind that the storyline was never finalized. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure – Phantom Blood was an anime movie that was released in Japanese theaters in 2007, based off the first part of the manga series JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. The film was only available in Japanese cinemas for less than 2 months, before vanishing and never being released on home media. In 2012, the first 16 minutes of the film had leaked its way online, being uploaded by a student who was given the footage as part of their education course. The footage has no audible dialogue. In 2019, lost media enthusiast Notalu assembled together a 30-minute approximation as to what the film may have been like. Big Bug Man was going to be a television hand-drawn movie about a candy company worker, Howard Kind, who becomes a city superhero after gaining his powers by being bitten by insects. The film is notable as it was the final movie to feature Marlon Brando, who played the character Mrs. Sour. He had only completed his recording only 1 month prior to his passing. This certainly gave the movie some prestige and enthusiasm for its release. However, 20 years after Brando's passing, Big Bug Man has still not materialized as a movie. Food Fight was a 2012 infamous animated movie that received appallingly negative reviews, as many critics and viewers had considered the animation to be, well, not too polished to put it nicely.
It's practically addictive.
That was a perfectly good bag of chips.
Survival of the fittest, Leonard.
Never opened. Never enjoyed.
It's often been contributed as to why the movie looks the way it does. It's because the film had previously spent 10 years in development turmoil. In 2004, director Larry Kasanoff claimed that the production had to start from scratch, as the hard drives for the movie was stolen, and it's often been hypothesized by the lost media community that the original version of Food Fight may have been a superior cut. But it turned out later on that this was a fabricated lie, as an excuse for director Kasanoff to restart on the movie. Only pre-production work and 7 minutes worth of finalized animation was actually completed during this time. In 2024, the vast majority of the original pre-production work of Food Fight had finally found its way onto the internet. A Day with SpongeBob SquarePants. It doesn't exist. Nothing more to say here. Me and My Shadow was an unfinished DreamWorks animation movie that was in development between 2010 and 2017, being set in a world where everyone's got a sentient shadow. Stanley's shadow begins taking self-control over his body to make his life a little bit more exciting. However, there's an evil scheme within the shadow realm that may put Stanley and his shadow at risk. The real world of the film would have been rendered through CGI, but all the shadow characters would have came to life via 2D animation. Unfortunately, by the time the movie was being worked on, DreamWorks Studios were going through a financial turmoil, leading to the company downsizing and cancelling several projects, including Me and My Shadow. There was a brief attempt to revitalize the project, but this was subsidized when DreamWorks was acquired by Universal. As it's pretty widely well known at this point, Shrek was initially meant to be an adventurous fairy tale movie starring the likes of Chris Farley as the main character. However, due to Katzenberg not being pleased with the developing story and Chris Farley's sudden passing, the whole movie was entirely reworked into a Mike Myers comedy fest. Larrikins was going to be a 2018 DreamWorks animated musical feature. The story would have been about Perry, who's an uptight, shy and cautious Bilby, who doesn't exactly like to get into danger. However, that all changes when he has to travel over the Australian outbacks to save the love of his life. The movie was planned to be finished and released in 2018. However, many movies that were scheduled for that year were either pushed back or promptly cancelled, Larrikins being the final movie to be pulled off the schedule, making 2018 the first year in 19 years to have DreamWorks not to release a feature animated movie. To this date, there are currently no plans to release Larrikins. Freaky Flickers: The Quest for the Golden Flicker was going to be a tie-in movie for the toy line Freaky Flickers. The film was directed and animated by one individual, Carrie Howe, who was trying to complete the movie within a tight deadline. However, the creator of the original toy line, Peter Gantner, orchestrated the theft of the hard drives of the film, which eventually led to a complicated lawsuit over the film. The Freaky Flickers toy line was an abysmal failure, and all things considered, it would have fell into relative obscurity. It's only thanks to the drama of the movie that's kept the short-lived toy line into some kind of limelight, although certainly not exposing the brand's most flattering side. Today, all that can be watched of the movie is just its trailer and a few short clips. In 2015, it was reported that Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers were in the considerations of making an Adventure Time movie. However, close to 10 years on, no further updates or announcements were ever made about the film. In 2014, it was announced that Lauren Faust was directing the animated feature film Medusa at Sony, being about a young Greek girl called Medusa, who winds up getting cursed by having snakes for hair. She sets out on a quest to reverse the curse. It was proposed to potentially make the movie via using 2D animation, although eventually Lauren Faust left the project due to creative differences. Medusa didn't last too much longer, however, as it was shortly shelved. Can You Imagine was an animated pet project by Genndy Tartakovsky that was in development at Sony Pictures Animation, slated for a release in 2018. However, the film never came about. To this day, very little is known about the plot. In 2012, it was announced that Sony was going to make a movie based off the Sly Cooper video game series. A release date and a teaser were unveiled, but 12 years on, there have been no further updates, seeming as if the movie is most likely cancelled. The Apostle was an Argentina animated movie released back in 1917, and as far as most animation historians are aware of, The Apostle is very well the first animated feature ever made. The movie was directed as well as entirely self-animated by Aquino Cresciani, handcrafting paper figures and bringing them to life via the stop-motion method. Unfortunately, the only known film copy of the film got destroyed in 1926, when Cresciani's studio went up in flames. Cresciani directed another feature animated movie, 1931 Pelodocirus, being the first animated film made in sound. Unfortunately, Cresciani's studio had multiple fire burns between the 50s and the 60s, with the only known film print of Pelodocirus being destroyed. In 2012, a making of reel of the film was rediscovered, showing the animation process and music orchestra, although the film runs without sound. Unless the film print of Pelodocirus ever turns up, this will probably be the closest we'll ever get to see the film in some kind of moving motion. In the 2010s, Genndy was set to direct Sony Pictures' Popeye movie. For Genndy, it was a dream come true as it was a beloved property from his childhood, but unfortunately, his vision of what he wanted the Popeye movie to be clashed with Sony's vision, as the studio wanted to make Popeye more contemporary. Genndy had departed from the project by 2015. Eventually, the movie wound up in the hands of King Feature Syndicate, with Genndy back on board with the film. But after 2 years, it became quite clear that Genndy's vision for Popeye would never come to fruition, so he yet again walked away from the project. But one day after it was announced that Genndy was no longer a part of the production, a work print was leaked online of the version of Popeye that Genndy was working with under Sony. During the mid-1930s, the Italian studio Italy Cartoon Rome was steadily in the process of making a feature film based on the stories of Pinocchio. And if it was completed as planned, then it would have made it the first cel-animated animated feature, predating Walt Disney's Snow White. However, at the time, there weren't enough Italian animators in the country that had the necessary skills to work on cel animation, so there was a lengthy period on the production of training up the animators. Unfortunately, the movie was never completed due to a lack of funding, and that there have been no further updates about what happened to the movie not since 1940. During the 1930s, MGM were in pre-production of making an animated feature on John Carpenter, based off the books by Edgar Wright Burroughs, with the production being led by animator Bob Clampett. By 1936, MGM had completed a test reel, demonstrating on how the final movie may look, but unfortunately, due to a lack of enthusiasm around the footage, the movie never wound up being produced. If the movie had been completed and released, then it may have just predated Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, as the first American full-feature animated film. During the early 90s, MGM were in the stages of developing a Betty Boop movie that would have been a musical. The movie would have been about Betty Boop trying to find her long-lost father. In 1993, the movie was unfortunately cancelled due to a change of management at MGM, In 2006, the website More Studio Inc. had released a storyboard song number from the film. While the site is now down, you can still access it via the Wayback Machine. In about 30 years after the movie was shelved, the film's script had found its way to the wider public online. It will likely be the closest we'll ever get to experience the film in some form. Cyberworld was the first CG animated movie to be presented in IMAX 3D, being released in the year 2000. The plot was set within a virtual museum titled Cyberworld, where it ends up being infested by 3 cyberbugs. The film featured a variety of different CG short films, such as the dance scene in DreamWorks Ants, and the Simpsons short film Homer 3D presented in Treehouse of Horror 6. Cyberworld never garnered any kind of home media release, making the animated portions created exclusively for the film somewhat difficult to find. "15,000 Debutas" was the first animated feature to be produced and made in Chile. The film spent 5 years in development, seeing a premiere in Chile in 1942. For being the first animated feature made in the country, the movie was very well received. But for the next 81 years, the movie had no public reshowings, not until 2023 where it was shown yet again in Santiago City. Currently, only about 7 minutes worth of footage can be easily publicly viewed online. Driftwood was an opera comedic animated sci-fi film, being about a little mouse-like creature named Clover, off on a mission to find the city of Driftwood, in the hope to save their home. The film began development in 2022, and was going to be distributed by Cartoon Network and HBO Max. However, after the merger between Warner Bros. And Discovery, many projects were canned as a tax write-off, as a way to subsidize the debt of both companies. As consequence, Driftwood will likely not be seeing a release. Empress Chung was an animated movie made in the collaboration of both North and South Korea, based off a famous Korean folktale about a young woman who sacrifices herself to restore her father's eyesight. In 2005, the movie was simultaneously released in both North and South Korea cinemas, making it the first Korean movie to be distributed in this way. However, outside of a contentious rumour that the film was released in North Korea on DVD, the movie never received a home media release. Scoob's Holiday Haunt was going to be a semi-sequel/mequel to 2020's Scoob, being about the mystery gang preparing Scooby-Doo's first Christmas. However, it doesn't quite go according to plan, for when Krampus enters into the scene. Unfortunately, when the movie was 95% complete, the film was written off as part of a tax write-off, meaning that legally, unless Warner Bros./Discovery pay back the government in written tax off, then they can't show any of the movies they've written off, including Scoob Holiday Haunt. However, the studio did allow the crew to finish off the film, so who knows, let's hope one day there may be a light at the end of the tunnel. Elf Bowling 2: The Great Halloween Pumpkin Heist was an unreleased sequel to the direct-to-DVD movie Elf Bowling. The only reason we know that the movie was once in development was that it was briefly mentioned at the end of a sales pitch for the original Elf Bowling film. Outside of this, nothing more has ever been heard of the sequel. In 2018, it was announced that Blue Sky Studios were going to make an adaptation of the novel Confessions of an Imaginary Friend. Outside of knowing that the film was going to be directed by Steve Martino, not much else is known about the project. The film got cancelled after the foreclosure of Blue Sky Studios in 2021. Sonic Armageddon was a planned Sonic movie in the early 2000s. which was proposed by Ben Hirsch, writer of Sonic Underground and the Sonic animated series, which presumably the film was some kind of continuation of the show, or at least took very heavy influence from, although through some unfortunate circumstances, Ben Hirsch was terminated from the project, and his story outline was eventually dissipated. By the late 90s, an animated movie about the last great ice age was doing the rounds at Fox Animation, to be potentially directed by Don Bluth and Gary Goldman. However, the project was reallocated to Blue Sky instead, and became the CGI feature film Ice Age. Not much of the Don Bluth version of Ice Age has been released. Cats Don't Dance was a Warner Brothers animated movie, released back in 1997, set during the golden era of Hollywood. However, one of the earliest mentions of the film being in development was back in 1993, on a newspaper article revealing that Michael Jackson was attached to the project. Precisely what this version would have been isn't exactly clear, and it's not known as to why Michael Jackson wasn't involved with the final version. Nothing more has ever been heard of the Michael Jackson version. LEGO Super Friends was going to be a continuation from the LEGO Batman movie, initially planned for a release in 2022, but due to the diminishing returns of the later LEGO movies, Warner Brothers had decided to pass on their movie rights of making LEGO movies to Universal Pictures instead, and since Universal don't own the rights to Batman, it's probably unlikely that we're going to see any more theatrically released DC LEGO movies for the foreseeable future. In 2003, it was revealed that the British band Gorillaz were in the early stages of producing an animated feature. The working title of the project was called Celebrity Harvest, primarily focusing on the dark side of the celebrity lifestyle. However, companies such as DreamWorks passed on the project due to how dark the film was. Only several bits of concept art can be found of the unmade project today. Tortoise vs. Hare was going to be Aardman's next animated feature after Chicken Run. The film spent a grueling 16 months in development, with voice actors coming on and off the project, sets being built only to be teared down without being photographed. It was a very unhappy production. Only 53 seconds worth of animation has been uncovered of the abandoned project. During the mid-1980s, Don Bluth was in the midst of developing an animated film titled The East of the Sun and West of the Moon. However, due to a lack of funding, the project never came to be. It's not entirely known as to how far the film got in development. Border 1939 was an unproduced Studio Ghibli film based off the novel by the same name. A story outline was conceived in April of 1989. However, unfortunately, at the time, Japanese sentiment to China had somewhat drifted due to ongoing tension from both countries. And since portions of the film was going to be set in China, Studio Ghibli felt that it was somewhat poor timing to produce the film. In 2009, it was planned to adapt the short stop-motion film Monster Safari into a full feature-length movie for the Jim Henson Company. However, there were no further updates about the movie's progress or status. Submarine Beret was a Soviet-Russia animated film, which combined several short stories about dolphins into one feature-length story. There were a grand total of 8 segments, but only 5 of them can be easily accessed online. Near to the end of Richard Williams' life, he began working on an animated feature film all about the ancient Greeks. He gave it the working title, I Hope I Live to Finish This. A fairly appropriate title, as at the age of 82 he had only completed the first 6 minutes. So just in case he didn't have too much time left on the clock, in 2015 he released the first 6 minutes as a short film titled Prologue. He cited Prologue as being the only true piece of work that he's ever created where he's truly satisfied with it.
Well, because I have now no deadline, only the death line. So I have time to get it right.
He continued working on the film up until 2019. where Richard Williams passed away at the age of 86. While likely this film will forever remain to be incomplete, nothing more has ever been revealed of Richard Williams' final piece of work. During the early 90s in the USSR, a film company by the name of Argos began development on an animated adaptation of The Hobbit. However, the film never got completed. Only the first 6 minutes of the film have been uploaded online. After Balto, Amblin Animation's next feature project was going to be a stage adaptation of Cats. But due to diminishing returns on their movies, the studio was closed down in 1997. Only 24 pieces of concept art have found their way online. Freddy Goes to Washington was going to be a follow-up movie of the British animated film Freddy as FR07. Development started while the first movie was still in production, but when FR07 finally got released, it was an abysmal failure. As a result, the following sequel was swiftly cancelled. Only about a minute's worth of rough animation have found their way online. In 2004, it was announced that Nickelodeon Movies were currently in development of a Mighty Mouse movie, but after nearly a decade in development and a promised 2013 release, the film just never materialised. In 1984, Don Bluth and Gary Goldman began planning to adapt the fairy tale story Beauty and the Beast. However, due to financial struggles, the movie never came to much. The project went on the back burner as Don and Gary moved on to other movies. But when it was announced that Disney were going to make their own version of Beauty and the Beast, the Don Bluth version was quietly cancelled. Little Blue Whale was a Don Bluth project where the plot would have centered around a little blue whale. After the tragic death of the little blue whale's mother by whalers, he befriends a little girl and other small animals, and they all band together to avoid the whalers. Robert Towne was the screenplay writer for the movie, and was contractually obligated to complete the final draft, although due to other commitments he never did finalise the script. Eventually, Don and Gary handed the full rights to the project to Robert Towne, and moved on to other projects such as Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven. Robert Towne never went any further with Little Blue Whale. The Croods Awakening was going to be an Aardman/DreamWorks co-production based off the Roald Dahl book The Twigs, with John Cleese and Kirk Meek Dicko aiding in the script writing. But eventually, when the partnership between DreamWorks and Aardman had folded, the movie was reworked to become DreamWorks The Croods. Tobimuru is a 1968 anime movie. The movie was directed and self-financed by Gentaro Nakajima. The plot featured Tobimuru, a young emperor who gets seduced by a disguised demon, who eventually causes destruction and chaos across the land, leaving Tobimuru to somehow stop this wicked spirit. Due to poor distribution, the movie was only ever shown in one theatre, leaving the film to be a financial flop. The movie wasn't shown publicly not until 2010, where a 16mm print of the movie would be privately screened at a couple of venues. However, this version of the movie is only the 86-minute rendition. Nobody knows where the original 81-minute cut is today. As of 2024, the movie cannot be publicly watched anywhere. Astro Boy, the Mighty Atom, Visitor of 100,000 Light Years, is the name of a 2005 Astro Boy anime movie. The story is about Astro with his friends heading off to the real-life Saturn moon of Titan to go and see if there is perhaps life on the moon. But it turns out there's a mechanical threat that's been trapped on Titan for 2 million years and has been waiting for just an occasion like this to finally escape. Today, the only thing that's publicly available to watch of the movie is just its trailer. Tusker was a cancelled CGI DreamWorks project that was initially slated for a release during the early 2000s. The story would have been about a group of Asian elephants making a great trek across India, all the while avoiding poachers. The film was described as a slightly comedic version of The Great Escape. The movie spent about 2 years in development. Round about the year 2001, production was placed on a brief hiatus. This was only meant to be short-term while the crew were working on other projects. But production never resumed on Tusker. The only things that have emerged over the years about the project is a plethora of concept art and 2 in-house videos about the production, which were never meant to be seen by the public.
Kavi, value life. Sounds like fucking Tonto anyway it comes out.
The Cigarette and the Weed is an anti-smoking short film that was created by Ralph Bakshi. A small snippet was shown in Halloween 3, but aside from this, nothing else can be seen of the short film. Infamous animation studio Sparkplug Entertainment, renowned for their mockbuster titles, had announced on their site an upcoming film called Frankenstein. Its intended release date between 2009 and 2010 came and went with no movie in sight. Blue Sky Studio was going to adapt the Mutt's comic strip as a somewhat follow-on spiritual successor to the Peanuts movie, but following on from 2017, there were no more updates about the project. The only elements that have resurfaced of the film is an 18-second pencil test animation. Sabdor Redemption is an unreleased Mexican animated feature that was created and made for a much more mature audience in mind. The budget was about $1 million and it was completed in 2009. However, the creative team were unable to find a distributor as unthrilled backers cite the movie being non-marketable. 15 years on and the movie has still not yet gained any kind of release. Strawberry Fields was going to be a Beatles jukebox musical, being a semi-spiritual successor to Yellow Submarine. The film was going to utilise CGI animation where if it was released as planned, then it would have made it the first movie to be fully CGI. However, this was later backtracked when it was realised that CGI hadn't came far enough just yet to create convincing humans. So the new plan was to have a CG background with 2D hand-drawn characters. But the movie began falling behind schedule, and there was quite a lot of clashing of creative differences. A lawsuit finally put an end to the production during the early 90s. About 30 minutes worth of footage has found its way onto archive.org. The Sunshine Princess was the third movie in a trilogy-long series. The films were created and produced in Italy. However, notably, the third film seems to be rarer than the 2 prior entries. Only 2 trailers can be found of the film online. Bobby's Girl is an unfinished animated movie, with Ralph Bakshi and John Kricfalusi at the helm of the project. The film was going to be a parody of teen comedies of the 80s. Ralph Bakshi was initially able to seek funding by TreeStar Pictures, but after a change of management, the new higher-ups didn't see the appeal of the movie, so they cut their funding. Cat Tale was an English-language Hong Kong movie featuring a cat called Rover who at birth gets wound up being raised by dogs. As he reaches his adolescence not feeling that he's fitting in his dogly home, he winds up running away to Catropolis. The studio making the movie, Imagery Animation Studio, wound up being bankrupt after their 2009 film Astro Boy was a box office dud, so by consequence Cat Tale has never been released, although you can still watch the trailer online. Another cancelled movie by Imagery Studios was Gatchaman. Exactly what the plot would have been is unknown. A handful of teasers of the film can still be easily found online. Kung Fu Space Punch was going to be an animated series on Netflix. It was initially going to launch with a movie on the platform. However, due to an overwhelming amount of 200,000 people unsubscribing from Netflix, it led to many projects being pulled from the schedule, including Kung Fu Space Punch. In 2003, Hasbro was going to release a My Little Pony movie, theatrically in theatres, based off the G3 incarnation of the franchise. The film would have been done in CGI animation. Hasbro had gotten as far as to promote the upcoming film, but the movie wound up being cancelled, with no official visual material ever being shown of the project. Old Saurus was a cancelled CGI animated movie that was going to be a parody of the kaiju/monster genre, although allegedly due to legal conflicts with Toho, the movie was quietly subsided. Heathcliff the Bad Kitty was going to be about Heathcliff reuniting three little kitties back to their parents. A teaser was made and released of the film designed to interest backers, and apparently $5 million were raised for the project and slated for a 2011 release. However, nothing ever came of the movie in the end. Kazon and the Unicorn was a film in development by Sony Pictures Animation. However, after 2013, no further updates were ever given about the movie. Monkeys of Mumbai was going to be a DreamWorks musical in development during the early to mid-2010s. To date, the only thing that's ever been publicly released of the film is its title card. The French comic strip characters Asterix and Obelix had their first motion picture made in 1967, although without permission from the original creators. When they saw the end product, they hated it, demanding all negatives and copies to be destroyed, and by consequence it's believed that today the film is permanently lost. Dreaming Machine was a feature-length anime that was cancelled in 2010 due to the unexpected passing of the director, Shotoki Kong. About 600 shots of 1500 were completed and animated, but as of 2024, none of the footage has ever been released, and it's still not currently known as to what the plot would have been about. Gegegen no Kitaro is a lost 1996 short film anime adapting a chapter from the manga Yokai Castle, although sources indicate that this may have been a very loose adaptation, having a somewhat different storyline. As of 2024, there is no place to watch the short film. Prince of Light is a 2001 movie which was a Japanese/Indian co-production. It earned quite a fair few dubs around the world. Today the movie is still viewable but only in an edited form, with the original cut still being inaccessible. Maya was a Mexican hand-drawn animated feature based and set in the golden age of the Mayan culture. The film had a scheduled release date for 2005 and had several trailers released for it. But due to creative differences, the movie wound up being cancelled 1 year before it was meant to be released. In 2016, there was indications that the project had been revitalized and had a new release date of 2020, but yet again, the movie never came to fruition. At the age of 13, Tim Burton made a short hand-drawn movie called The Island of Dr. Agor. 8 years later, he would make a follow-up called The Stalk of the Celery Monster, which can easily be viewed online. But as for its predecessor, no footage or images have ever been publicly shown. When Laika first opened their doors, they announced their first two features were going to be a stop-motion movie called Coraline and a CGI movie called Jack and Ben's Animated Adventure. But come 2008, it was announced that the movie was cancelled, with a large portion of staff mainly working on the Jack and Ben film to be laid off. Within the World of the Power of Women was a short film that was made and released in Japan in 1933, hailed as the first anime to be produced in sound, although unfortunately today there are no known surviving prints. Deep was a CGI animated film set within a post-apocalyptic world, with Shane Actor as the director and Tim Burton as the producer. Scantily very little is known about the project. Fox Animation had plans to produce an animated musical adaptation of Dracula, although acting as a mockery and parody of the Disney princess genre, being pitched as the Disney version of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Precisely as to why the film was cancelled is currently not known. In 2012, it was announced that Blue Sky and 20th Century Fox were going to adapt the book anthology. However, there wouldn't be any further updates not until 2018, when it was revealed that the project had been relocated to Paramount Pictures, wanting to adapt a whole franchise from all 13 books. However, 6 years on and there hasn't been any further updates. The 2009 short animated film Alma had been picked up by Guillermo del Toro to be turned into a full feature-length movie. The last update about the film was in 2012, that it was still in visual development. 12 years on and nothing more has been heard. A Martian Christmas is an American/Mexican direct-to-video animated feature that was slated to be released in 2009. Some sources claim that it was aired on television, but there's nothing to back this up. Despite DVDs being listed on Amazon, no copies were sold or ever made it to market. At most, the only thing that's ever been released of the film is just its trailer. Magic 7 was an unfinished animation children's movie that began development in 1991, intended to premiere as a TV movie. From what can be currently ascertained, the plot would have been about two kids battling against Earth's greatest enemies. Unfortunately, one of the performers, John Candy, passed away in 1994, leading to his character being completely recast. And then an actress tied to the production, Madeline Kahn, passed away in 1999, leading her role to be recast as well. Associates of the production changed hands a couple of times, but eventually, after a lack of funding, the movie was cancelled during the early 2000s. Wisconsin was an animated short film made back in 1994, directed by Scott Moeller, who would later create the CGI show Tripping the Riff, who the character Cho McBlob made his debut in this short film. Today, the only thing that's currently available to watch is a work print online. In 1982, Ralph Bakshi directed the adult film Hey Good Looking, but the film had previously been within 9 years of development turmoil. Initially, it was going to be a live-action/animation hybrid film, but come 1975, Warner Brothers demanded for Ralph Bakshi to completely redo the movie to make it a fully animated feature. But by the late 70s, Warner Brothers had completely dropped out of the project, leaving Ralph Bakshi to self-finance the film. The only footage that's ever been seen of the original Hey Good Looking was a leaked 1974 season reel from at the time upcoming Warner Bros. Movies, featuring a 3-minute presentation of what the movie was going to be. The Humpty Dumpty Circus was a 1908 short stop-motion film where the directors would utilise the real-life toy set of the Humpty Dumpty Circus released back in 1903. Individual figures of the set today will now fetch a pretty penny on the secondary market. It's generally considered by animation historians that the Humpty Dumpty Circus was the first stop-motion film. For a short time, there was a lot of contention as to when the short was exactly produced, speculating that it may have been as early as 1898. But newspaper clippings have indeed confirmed that it was made a decade later. Today, there are no known surviving copies of the short. and all subsequent images that have been related to the short are just general product photographs of the Humpty Dumpty toy set. Roy was one of the first animated feature films produced in Mexico. The plot featured Roy considered to be the best astronaut in the world. He's sent out on a mission to Mars after it's been discovered that cosmic radiation has been deliberately projected straight to Earth, being sourced all the way back to Mars. Roy's accompanied with Dr. Faz and psychologist Helena. Upon arriving, the trio find out that Mars is being ruled by a tyrant king. The production of the film was an absolute shamble. The director had no prior experience with animation. Only one professional animator was hired for the film. He struggled immensely to explain to the director as to how the animation process works. When a better job was offered up, he moved on. 3 episodes of the 1936 Flash Gordon serial was used to trace and rotoscope some of the animation. The director eventually hired on his teenage relatives to help him complete the movie, and according to one of the very few reviews of the movie, the end product was very amateurish. The movie ended up only having a short run in 12 theatres in 1983 and has never been shown on television or released on home media. Negatives of the feature are known to still exist, but the current copyright holder has not yet authorized any digitization. Pilot was the first independent animation studio in Russia. The company existed for about 15 years. In 1986, they began development on a feature film called Train Arriving. Although due to economic inflation during the 90s, the movie was shelved. About 40 minutes was completed, but unfortunately in 2005, the negatives had found themselves being spoiled in a flood. The novel The Anubis Tapestry was announced that it was going to have a feature film adaptation being released in 2018 with Blue Sky at the helm of the project. However, by June of 2017, the movie was removed off the schedule, with no further updates about its development. Big Nasty was going to be a CGI musical about microorganisms living in a human body. It was going to be released under Sony Pictures' animation banner in 2007. However, the project faded away with no official confirmation about its cancellation. Hot Stuff was going to be a live-action / CGI hybrid animated film being produced and released by DreamWorks, with Lizzie and Wendy Mololukes slated to write the film. The project was in development during the early 2010s, but after 2014, a disastrous financial year for DreamWorks, there have been no further updates about the progress of the film. Natrudin was an unfinished British movie from the early 1970s, made under the studio and direction of Richard William. The film was an adaptation of the Natrudin stories, which were a collection of 13th century Middle Eastern tales that were translated into English, with Omar Shah being the copyright holder of the book and filing the company's finances. Development began in 1964, and 8 years later, according to the movie's film composer, 3 hours worth of footage was assembled, but they didn't exactly tell a cohesive narrative, and the movie was still far off of not being completed. But development behind the scenes broke down. Richard had suspected that Omar Shah had been drawing himself some of the studio's money out without writing it down, and if things couldn't get any worse, in his family there was a major dispute as to who exactly owned the rights to Natrudin. Eventually it led to William parting ways with the Omar family, and he shortly afterwards began a new project using his original created characters that he was going to incorporate in the Natrudin film. This included Zigzag, the Thief, Nanny, and the Brigands. Aside from a short work-in-progress excerpt of the Natrudin film, none of the material has ever been publicly seen. It's not known as to what had happened or the reels of the movie. In 1979, an anime movie was made of Anne Frank, adapting 4 stories from her diary entries. The film additionally featured an interview from Otto Frank, Anne Frank's real-life father, who passed away 1 year after the movie was released. This was the first animated adaptation of Anne Frank's diary. The film coincided as to what would have been Anne Frank's 50th birthday, but after airing on Japanese television, the film has never been publicly shown ever again. Gil's All-Fried Diner was a novel that was published in 2005. In 2009, it was announced that DreamWorks was going to make an animated feature of the book, but in 2013, it was revealed that after waning interest, that the movie would not be going on ahead at DreamWorks. Hallelujah Night was a murder mystery animated film, which was by the artist Diana Hanson Young, renowned for her paintings of Hawaiian ladies. The movie debuted on Con TV and was later released on VHS. However, today they are extremely rare, and the film is currently not available to watch anywhere. The Adventures of Juku the Dog was the first Estonian experimental animated film. It was meant to be the beginning of a series of films with Juku the Dog. However, the preceding sequel was never finished, and the one and only film that Juku appeared in out of 6 minutes, only 4 minutes have survived to the 21st century. Okay, please forgive me, I think I'm going to butcher this name. Maze Perkonexo Jiko, Tenpenkyo no Giant, is an adult anime that was released in Japanese theatres in 1998. It was part of the Maze franchise. However, after its theatrical run, the film has never gained a home media release. Christmas Gift was a 1971 traditionally animated Brazilian film, the second full-length animated movie to be produced in the country, and the first to be produced in colour. The film was only ever exclusively shown in the city of Manaus. It did receive pretty favourable reviews. In 2023, YouTube user Hector Fictor did an interview of the Sun's original director, where in the video a few clips are shown of the movie. Monkey Love is a 1935 cartoon that doesn't have any surviving visual material, no footage, no pictures, no poster, but the soundtrack to the short film does still exist.
I'm in love! Oh, I'm in a whirl and my world is a girl. I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love!
Cool Ship was a 1932 adult animated film, the first of its kind made in Japan. It was about 10 minutes in length and was going to be part of a bigger featurette, but due to its content it was confiscated by authorities. In the early 2000s, the remaining footage was donated to the National Film Centre. As of 2024, nothing yet has been shown publicly of the film. Kaiser is the earliest known Brazilian short film made in the country. Prior to Kaiser, there were other Brazilian animations, however, they were much more shorter in length, essentially being test reels for the medium, and didn't really comprise of any type of narrative. Kaiser was a political satire, critiquing on the Germans' expansion during World War I. The film was completed and premiered in 1917. By the turn of the century, it was considered that the movie is forever lost. But in 2013, the documentary Light Animate Action featured a recreation on how the lost film may have looked. Urashima Tero is a 1918 Japanese short film, which is an adaptation of the Japanese folktale by the same name, about a fisherman riding a turtle to an underwater world. In 2007, it was believed that the movie was rediscovered at a flea market. However, after a contemporary magazine was found, featuring images of the short film, they didn't match with the rediscovered footage. The reel of film was an unrelated project. Without a Trace was a 1918 short film created by Cristiani, the man responsible for the first animated feature film. This film was about a real-life scandal about a German commander who orders the sinking of an Argentine ship as a way to frame the Entente. Real-life survivors contributed giving their accounts over the act. After a short run where it wasn't immensely successful, the film wound up being confiscated by the Foreign Affairs, and today it's not known if any copies do still exist. The Tales of the Priest and His Workman Border was the first Soviet animated feature film, based off the Russian fairy tale by the same name. The film began development in 1932. Animation was nearly completed by the late 1930s, but due to the outbreak of World War II, production had to be shelved. Most of the work of the film was stored in an archive, which was later tragically blown up in 1942. Today, only 2 minutes of animation is known to survive. Flammimals was meant to be Illumination's first feature animated movie, based off the Ricky Gervais book by the same name, being about 50 misshapen ugly creatures, where the main protagonist would have been one called Pudgy. By the plot description, they would have went off on a mission to change the world. The film was initially announced in 2009, but no feature film ever materialised. Although in 2011, Illumination did make a short film based off the book, named Brad and Gary, but it's never been made fully available to the public. In 1995, Bill Koch approached 20th Century Fox to produce an adult animated feature film called Betty of the Jungle, where in his own words it would have been a sexy George of the Jungle rendition. However, the pitch in the movie never came to anything. In the early 90s, Don Bluth yet again tried to make another whale movie, titled Can Do, Song of the Ice Whale. This film was going to be set around Barrow, Alaska, centering on an abandoned baby grey whale. Not much else is known about the plot. Secret Moon Demon was a 1969 anime, renowned for being the first anime of its kind to be given an R/18 rating. Upon its original release, it gained terrible reviews and had to be re-edited/censored. Despite its abysmal success, it did gain a home media release, first being released as an open reel in 1970, and then gaining a VHS release in 1981, being re-edited and presented as an hour feature. Today, these copies are extraordinarily rare to find, and as of 2024, there's no way to view the movie at all. On April 10th of 2003, during a Q&A section on his site, Jim Hill had discussed a very interesting Lost Popeye cartoon that was a little bit more saucier than the rest, where it features Popeye and Betty in a very intimate engagement, recounting one bit where Popeye's out of breath, but then he downs some spinach which enables him to, well, finish off the job. Jim Hill claims that he was told this information by several Fleischer animators, where in 1938 this special cartoon was screened for them, as part of a thank you party for relocating from New York to Florida. According to some of the animators, the film would occasionally be reshown, mainly to male visitors. The Fleischer brothers and their studio was moved out of Paramount Pictures after 1942, and exactly what the fate was of this rather saucy Popeye cartoon is not known. Jim Hill's retelling of the account is our only source that this cartoon may have once existed. St. Francis is an anti-war animated short film, with the runtime reported to be about 25 minutes. The film was being developed between 1932 and 1939. Unfortunately, the film wound up being disposed of during France's Nazi occupation. There are reportedly some stills left of the film, but they have never been publicly released. A Good Beer was an 1892 French short film, using the ancient technique of theatre optique to illustrate the moving drawings. Sadly today there are no known copies left of the film, as director Reynaud had thrown the majority of his work in the Seine River, doing this on the account of his deep depression he was going through. Truly an unfortunate tale of both the artist and his art. And finally, rounding things off for the Iceberg, on something that we can all relate to, that animated project you did all the way back when you were a kid, for as long as it's been commercially available for people to self-animate. I'm sure we've all attempted to have at least made one silly animation in our life, either for an assignment back in school, or just something we did in our own spare time. and perhaps we may have unintentionally lost the footage years ago, or the final product is something we still have, but it might be something that we're a little flustered to share. And there we go, we finally made it to the end. And yeah, there were a lot of topics that were new to me that I'd never known about. I will admit, icebergs and list videos are never usually my forte. For single topics, I do really love diving deep down and learning more and more about them. But for videos like this, there's just so much more to unpack, that I just find it the equivalent of racing all over the map. It's all a bit daunting and tedious. I do generally commend other content creators who are able to do this consistently. But once I start seeing the bigger picture, that's when I really get into it. So on reflection, I've really enjoyed making this video. Feel tempted to make more, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you if you've made it this far. Let me know what some of your favourite subjects were. Me personally, I was quite more attracted to the stuff lower down on the iceberg. I would have loved to have seen on how Natrodin and Jungle Betty would have turned out. But then higher up, I do wish that we did get Tortoise versus Hare. But hey, it is what it is. Anyway, you lot take care, and ta-ta for now.